I got home early from my business trip, hoping to surprise my wife, Jessica. We've been married for 7 years, and I always try to bring something back for her after these long trips, whether it was a piece of jewelry or just her favorite coffee from a local cafe. This time, I'd planned something special, an anniversary trip to the Bahamas. I had the tickets in my bag and couldn't wait to see the look on her face when I told her. Pulling into the driveway, something immediately felt off. Jessica's car was there, but there was another vehicle parked in front of the house, a sleek, black sedan that I didn't recognize. My first thought was that it belonged to one of her friends. Maybe someone had stopped by for coffee. But as I walked towards the door, I noticed the blinds were drawn. That wasn't like her. We always left them open during the day to let the natural light in. I unlocked the front door quietly, intending to sneak in and surprise her. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard soft voices coming from upstairs, her voice and a man's. My heart began to race. A million explanations flashed through my mind, trying to make sense of the situation. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe her brother had stopped by. Maybe. But then I heard laughter. Her laughter, warm and playful. The kind of laughter I hadn't heard in months. It wasn't a laugh meant for me. My hand froze on the stair railing, heart racing. I took a breath, trying to calm the growing storm inside me. The voices from upstairs, though muffled, were unmistakably intimate. Jessica's soft laugh, the laugh she used to make when we were newly in love, floated down the stairs, a laugh that hadn't been meant for me in months. I stood motionless, grappling with what my mind was refusing to accept. Slowly, I took another step up, each one heavier than the last, like I was climbing towards an execution. The closer I got, the more distinct the voices became. Hers, light and flirtatious, and his, deep and confident, responding in a tone that suggested familiarity, comfort. It felt like a knife was twisting in my gut. I stopped at the top of the stairs, frozen, unwilling to go further yet unable to turn back. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, offering a sliver of a view into the room where we had shared so many moments. Some happy, some difficult, but all ours. And there they were. Jessica was lying on the bed, her body half covered by the sheets. She was laughing, her head tilted towards a man I didn't recognize. He was shirtless, propped up on one elbow beside her, one hand casually draped over her bare waist. I felt my stomach churn. Her laugh was full, joyful, more than I had seen her smile in months. His presence felt invasive, an insult to everything we had built together. My vision blurred with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The plane tickets to the Bahamas crumpled in my hand, their promise of a surprise getaway now a cruel joke. This was supposed to be a celebration of our love, our anniversary. But now it was clear that she had moved on to someone else, leaving me with nothing but a shattered illusion. I should have stormed in right then. I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand how she could do this. My body tensed, ready to confront the betrayal head-on. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the sheer shock of the moment, or maybe some part of me wasn't ready to face the full reality of what I had just seen. Either way, I turned on my heel and made my way back down the stairs, moving as quietly as I could. I didn't want them to know I was here, didn't want them to see me broken like this. I wasn't ready to give them that satisfaction. Back in the kitchen, I collapsed into a chair at the dining table, my hands shaking. I stared blankly at the tickets in front of me. A trip to the Bahamas. I had planned it so carefully, thinking it would reignite whatever had been fading between us lately. I had blamed it on stress, on work, on the monotony of daily life. Never did it cross my mind that she might have been pulling away because of someone else. The laughter continued upstairs, haunting me, reminding me of how blind I had been. My phone was still in my pocket. I pulled it out and opened our text messages, looking for any sign, any hint that I had missed. I scrolled through weeks of mundane conversations, grocery lists, reminders to pick up dry cleaning, occasional, "I love you," texts that now felt hollow. How had I been so stupid? Had this been going on for weeks? Months? Longer? My mind was racing with questions, none of which I had the answers to. But one thing was clear. This wasn't a fling. The way they talked, the way they laughed. It was the ease of people who had been together for a while. How long had she been lying to me? Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to leave, to walk out the door and never look back. But I couldn't move. My body was rooted to the spot, weighed down by the crushing reality of what I had just witnessed. I didn't know where to go or what to do. This house, our house, suddenly felt foreign, like I didn't belong here anymore. It was as if I had been cast out of my own life, watching as some stranger took my place beside the woman I had vowed to spend the rest of my life with. I pulled up her social media, scrolling through pictures of us smiling at family gatherings, at vacations, at mundane little moments. Every photo of us together felt like a lie now. Had she already started seeing him when we took that trip to the mountains last year? When we celebrated her birthday with a fancy dinner downtown? I thought back to moments when she had seemed distant, distracted, and realized that every time I had asked if something was wrong, she'd brushed it off. "I'm just tired," she'd say. "Work's been crazy." And like an idiot, I believed her. The sound of footsteps above me snapped me out of my trance. They were moving around, talking softly, getting dressed, I assumed. The thought made my blood boil. I wanted to burst in there, to throw him out of my house and demand answers from her. But at the same time, I didn't want to hear whatever excuses she would try to give. Nothing she could say would make this better. Nothing could erase the image of her lying in bed with him, laughing like she used to laugh with me. A new wave of anger surged through me as I thought about what to do next. I couldn't just sit here and do nothing. I needed to take back control, to stop feeling like a victim in my own life. But what was I supposed to do? Leave and pretend this never happened? Confront her now, while that smug bastard was still upstairs? Or wait until he was gone and have it out with her alone? Each option felt worse than the last. I grabbed my phone again, this time pulling up my contacts. Should I call someone? My best friend, David? He'd know what to do. Or maybe my sister, Emily? She'd tell me to pack my bags and never look back. But I wasn't ready to talk to anyone. I wasn't ready to explain why my marriage was suddenly falling apart, or admit that I had let it slip through my fingers without even realizing it. Instead, I scrolled through the photos on my phone. There was a recent one of Jessica and me at a friend's wedding. She looked so beautiful in that picture, her dark hair falling perfectly over her shoulders, her smile bright and genuine. Or so I had thought. Now, looking at it, all I saw was deceit. How long had she been faking that smile? How many moments like that had been tainted by lies? I slammed the phone down on the table, the force of it jolting me back to reality. I couldn't stay in this limbo any longer. I had to do something, anything. The anger was burning too hot inside me, threatening to explode if I didn't release it soon. I stood up abruptly, knocking my chair back with a loud scrape. The noise echoed through the house, and I heard a sudden silence from upstairs. They had heard me. Good. Maybe now they would feel some of the panic and dread I had been drowning in for the past half hour. A moment later, I heard the soft sound of footsteps on the stairs. My heart raced, knowing that in a few seconds, I would come face to face with the man who had been sleeping with my wife in my bed. I braced myself, fists clenched at my sides, ready for whatever confrontation was about to happen. The first to appear was Jessica. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and guilt. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, staring at me like she wasn't sure if I was real or if this was some nightmare she was about to wake up from. "Mark," she whispered, her voice shaky. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat felt too tight, my chest too heavy. I just stood there, glaring at her, waiting for the other man to show his face. And then he did. He came down a few steps behind her, pulling on his shirt as he descended. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a smug expression that made me want to punch him right then and there. He didn't look the least bit ashamed or guilty. If anything, he looked amused, like he found the whole situation funny. "Who the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice barely more than a growl. Jessica flinched at the harshness in my tone, but the man beside her just smirked, like he had nothing to be worried about. His arrogance fueled my anger, the heat rising to a dangerous level. "Mark, please," Jessica began, stepping towards me, but I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. I said, "Who is he?" My eyes were fixed on the man now. He stood a few feet behind her, arms crossed over his chest, like he was sizing me up. The man finally spoke, his voice calm, almost mocking. "Name's Greg," he said casually, "and I think it's time I leave." He gave Jessica a glance, like they were sharing some private joke. Jessica bit her lip, her eyes darting between Greg and me. "Mark, I can explain," she said, her voice trembling now. She stepped closer again, reaching out as if to touch me, but I recoiled from her touch like it burned. "Explain what?" I spat, the anger bubbling up uncontrollably. "That you've been sleeping with him? That you've been lying to me? That you've made a fool of me?" Jessica's face crumpled as tears filled her eyes. But I didn't care. The sight of her crying didn't move me, didn't make me feel anything except a bitter satisfaction. Let her cry. It wasn't nearly enough to make up for what she'd done. Greg moved past her, heading toward the door, but I wasn't done with him yet. "Not so fast," I snapped, stepping in front of him. He stopped, raising his eyebrows in a silent challenge. Greg didn't flinch, didn't show an ounce of fear as I blocked his way. He stood there, arms still crossed, his eyes flickering with amusement, as though this was just another inconvenience in his day. Jessica stood frozen behind him, her hands clasped nervously in front of her, eyes wide and pleading, but I wasn't going to let her stop me. "You think you can just walk out of here?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with fury. "You think you can ruin my life and stroll out like nothing happened?" Greg shrugged, completely unfazed. "Look, man, you don't want to do this. I get it, you're pissed off. But I'm not the problem here." "Not the problem?" I echoed, incredulous. "You're sleeping with my wife." "Yeah, but whose fault is that?" Greg's smirk never faltered. He was pushing me, trying to get under my skin, and it was working. "Maybe you should ask yourself why she turned to someone else." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was he seriously trying to justify this? To act like it was somehow my fault that my wife had been unfaithful? My fists clenched at my sides, and it took every ounce of restraint I had not to hit him right there. Behind him, Jessica let out a soft sob, but I couldn't even look at her. My mind was filled with violent thoughts, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could control myself. Before I could do anything, Greg pushed past me, moving towards the front door. "You need to work this out with her," he said, his voice still calm, still maddeningly collected. "I'm not getting involved in your domestic drama." I stepped forward, ready to stop him again, but Jessica grabbed my arm. "Mark, please," she whispered through her tears. "Let him go. He's not worth it." Her touch sent a jolt through me, and for a moment, I almost gave in to the impulse to confront her, to demand answers from the woman I had once trusted with everything. But then I looked at Greg, who was now standing with his hand on the door handle, waiting for me to make a move. This was it. I could either lose control, let the anger win, or I could let him go and deal with Jessica. The rational part of my mind was screaming at me to let him leave, to focus on the person who had betrayed me, my wife. But the sight of Greg's smug, arrogant face made it impossible to think straight. Just as I was about to take another step towards him, he opened the door. "See you around, man," he said over his shoulder before stepping outside and closing the door behind him. I stood there for a few seconds, breathing hard, fists still clenched, until the sound of the door clicking shut seemed to bring me back to reality. Now it was just me and Jessica. The silence between us was suffocating. I could hear her quiet, ragged breaths as she tried to pull herself together, but I didn't turn around to face her. I couldn't. I didn't trust myself not to explode. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything that had just happened pressed down on me like a lead blanket, making it hard to think, hard to even move. The image of Jessica and Greg in our bed played over and over in my mind, a twisted loop of betrayal that I couldn't escape. Finally, Jessica broke the silence. "Mark, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I said, my voice rising. "How can you say that? You've been sleeping with him, Jessica. How long has this been going on? Weeks? Months?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at the floor, avoiding my gaze. That was all the confirmation I needed. How long? I demanded again, louder this time. A few months, she finally admitted, barely above a whisper. Her hands were shaking, and she rubbed them together as if trying to warm them. But it's over now. I swear. I never wanted you to find out like this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Over. I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. You think this is over just because I found out? Jessica flinched at the harshness in my voice, but I didn't care. I couldn't feel anything but anger and betrayal, two emotions swirling together in a poisonous cocktail that made it impossible to think straight. I wanted to hurt her, to make her feel the same kind of pain that was tearing me apart from the inside. You should have told me, I said, my voice quieter now, more dangerous. You should have told me the first time you thought about cheating. You should have told me before you let him into our bed. Jessica sobbed, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she cried. I was confused, Mark. Things between us hadn't been right for a long time, and I didn't know how to fix it. Greg. He was there. Her excuses only made me angrier. I couldn't believe she was trying to justify this, to make it seem like it was some mistake she had stumbled into instead of a deliberate choice she had made over and over again. Don't you dare blame this on our marriage, I snapped. We could have worked through whatever problems we had. But you decided to throw it all away. She was sobbing openly now, but I wasn't moved. Not this time. I paced the living room, trying to get a grip on the emotions that were threatening to consume me. The rage, the hurt, the sense of betrayal. It was all too much. I wanted to break something, scream, lash out in any way I could, but none of that would change the fact that my wife had been unfaithful. Nothing could undo what I had seen upstairs. Why, Jessica? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Why did you do it? Wasn't I enough? She wiped her eyes, her face red and puffy from crying. It's not about you not being enough, she said, her voice trembling. I was feeling so disconnected from everything. From you, from our life. I didn't know how to fix it, and Greg? Greg? I cut her off, the mention of his name making me want to punch a hole in the wall. You thought Greg was the solution? Some random guy who just happened to make you feel better for a few months? Her silence told me everything I needed to know. It hadn't been random. It hadn't been some fleeting thing that she regretted. She had chosen him, and in doing so, she had destroyed everything we had built together. You've thrown away everything, Jessica, I said, shaking my head. For what? For someone who won't even be here tomorrow? Jessica collapsed onto the couch, her sobs racking her body as she buried her face in her hands. But I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. My heart was too shattered, too raw, to offer her any kind of forgiveness right now. I wasn't even sure if I ever could. I walked over to the kitchen table, where I had left the plane tickets for our anniversary trip. They were still there, crumpled from when I had squeezed them in my fist earlier. I picked them up, staring at them for a moment before turning back to her. Do you even remember that it's our anniversary next week? I asked quietly, holding up the tickets. Jessica's eyes widened in horror as she realized what I was holding. Oh my God, she whispered. Mark, I didn't. Of course you didn't, I interrupted. You've been too busy with him to even think about us, haven't you? She didn't deny it. She just stared at me, speechless, as I tore the tickets in half and dropped them onto the floor. They fluttered down like dead leaves, a fitting symbol for the remnants of our marriage. I planned this for us, I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. I was going to surprise you. I thought maybe we could fix things. But you've already made your choice, haven't you? Jessica shook her head, her tears flowing freely again. No, Mark, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you. I swear I do. I was just what? I snapped, cutting her off before she could spew more excuses. Just lonely? Just looking for a little excitement? Don't give me that crap, Jessica. If you loved me, you wouldn't have slept with him. I do love you, she insisted, standing up from the couch and stepping towards me, her hands reaching out as if to hold me. But I took a step back, refusing to let her touch me. I made a mistake, a horrible mistake, but I can fix this. We can fix this. Please, Mark, don't walk away from us. Her desperation was palpable, but it wasn't enough. Not this time. Not after everything I had seen, everything I now knew. "You've already walked away, Jessica," I said quietly. "You walked away the moment you decided to let him into our life. There's nothing left to fix." She let out a broken sob, her hands falling to her sides in defeat. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Please tell me what to do, Mark. Tell me how to make this right." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel that familiar tug of love or affection. All I saw was the person who had betrayed me, the woman who had shattered our marriage. And I didn't know if I could ever see her any other way again. "I don't know if you can fix this," I said, my voice low but firm. "I don't know if I even want you to try." Her face crumpled at my words, the weight of them hitting her like a physical blow. She sank back onto the couch, her shoulders shaking with sobs. But I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not now. Not after everything she had done. "I thought we were happy," I continued, more to myself than to her. "I thought we could work through whatever rough patch we were going through. But you decided to fix it by cheating on me, by betraying everything we had." Jessica lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes red and swollen. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "I know that sounds hollow now, but it's the truth. I never wanted to hurt you, Mark." "Well, you did," I said, my voice cold. "You hurt me more than you could possibly imagine." She let out a soft, broken sob, but I didn't feel the same sympathy I used to feel for her tears. Instead, I felt hollow, numb, like the part of me that had loved her, trusted her, had died somewhere between seeing her with Greg and hearing her admit to months of lies. "I don't know how we come back from this," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I sat down in the armchair across from her, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me like a physical burden. The anger that had burned so hot in me earlier was slowly being replaced by a deep, gnawing sadness. This was the woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built a life with, and now it felt like that life was crumbling around me. Jessica wiped at her face, trying to compose herself. "We can go to therapy," she suggested, her voice shaking. "We can work on this together. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. Please, Mark, just give me a chance." I shook my head slowly, not because I didn't believe in therapy, but because I didn't know if trust could ever be rebuilt after something like this. "I don't know if that's enough," I said. "How can I ever trust you again? Every time you're late coming home, every time you're out with friends, I'll wonder. I'll wonder if you're with him, or with someone else." "It's not like that," she insisted, her voice desperate. "I've cut things off with Greg. It's over, I swear. I lost my way, Mark, but I can find it again. With you. Please don't give up on us." Her words might have meant something months ago, before I had found out the truth, but now, they just felt like empty promises. I wasn't sure if I had anything left to give her. The love I had once felt was buried beneath layers of betrayal and pain, and I didn't know if it could ever resurface. The silence between us stretched on, heavy and suffocating. I stared at the torn plane tickets on the floor, the last remnants of a life that no longer seemed real. We had been happy once, hadn't we? Or had that happiness been a lie too? I didn't know anymore. I didn't know what was real and what was just a facade. Jessica broke the silence again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mark, please. I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. Don't let this be the end." I looked at her, my heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. Did I still love her? Part of me wanted to believe that love could conquer this, that we could somehow rebuild what had been broken. But another part of me, the part that had been shattered by her betrayal, knew that things would never be the same. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted quietly. "I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be anymore. You broke something in me, Jess. Something that can't just be fixed with apologies and promises." She sobbed harder, her hands clutching at the fabric of the couch as if it could somehow anchor her to reality. "I know I did," she choked out. "I know I hurt you, but we can get through this. We've been through so much together, Mark. Please don't give up on me." I closed my eyes, feeling the exhaustion wash over me. I was so tired, tired of fighting, tired of feeling like I was on the verge of losing everything. But I didn't know if I had the strength to keep going. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. Jessica sat there, waiting for me to say something, to make a decision about the future of our marriage. But how was I supposed to decide something like that in the middle of all this chaos? My emotions were a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and confusion, and I didn't know which one to trust. Finally, I stood up from the armchair, needing to put some physical distance between us. "I need time," I said, my voice sounding foreign even to my own ears. "I can't make any decisions right now." Jessica looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "Time? How much time? Mark? Please, don't leave me hanging like this. I need to know if we can fix this." "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if we can fix this. I need to figure out if I can even look at you without seeing him." Her face crumpled again, but she didn't try to argue this time. She just nodded, accepting my words with a quiet resignation. "Okay," she whispered. "Take the time you need. But please, Mark, don't shut me out forever." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked towards the front door, grabbing my keys from the table. I needed to get out of there. I needed space to think, to breathe, to process everything that had just happened. Staying in that house, with the weight of her betrayal hanging over us like a cloud, was suffocating me. I stepped outside, the cool evening air hitting me like a slap in the face. For a moment, I just stood there on the porch, staring out into the darkening sky, trying to make sense of everything. My world had been turned upside down in the span of an hour, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. I walked to my car, opening the driver's side door but not getting in. Instead, I leaned against the car, staring at the house that had once been our home, the place where we had built a life together. But now it felt like a stranger's house, a place tainted by secrets and lies. How had it come to this? How had we gone from being the couple everyone envied to this? I thought back to the early days of our relationship, when everything had felt so simple, so perfect. We were happy, weren't we? Or had we just been pretending all along? I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen. I could call David, my best friend since college. He'd know what to do. Or maybe I should call Emily, my sister. She would tell me to walk away, to leave Jessica and never look back. But I wasn't ready to talk to anyone yet. I wasn't ready to explain why my marriage was falling apart. Instead, I got into the car and started the engine. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here. As I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, my mind kept replaying the events of the last hour over and over again like a broken record. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get the image of Jessica and Greg out of my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, laughing, touching, sharing something that should have been mine. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to be consumed by rage, to feel nothing but anger towards her for what she had done. But the truth was, I still loved her. Even after everything, even after the betrayal, I couldn't just turn off the feelings I had for her. And that made it hurt even more. I pulled into a parking lot near the park where Jessica and I used to go for picnics on lazy Sunday afternoons. I turned off the engine and sat there in silence, staring at the empty playground in the distance. It was eerily quiet, the kind of stillness that felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. For a long time, I just sat there, my mind racing with thoughts and questions I didn't have answers to. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? Or was this the end? The end of our marriage? The end of the life we had built together? I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes and taking a deep breath. The truth was, I didn't know if I had it in me to forgive her. Trust was fragile, and once it was broken, it was almost impossible to rebuild. Could I live with the constant doubt, the nagging fear that every time she left the house, she might be meeting someone else? Could I go on wondering if she was lying to me every time she said she was working late or out with friends? I didn't know. I didn't know if I had the strength to be that person. But the thought of walking away from her, from everything we had shared, was equally unbearable. I still loved her, and that love was tangled up with so many memories, so many moments that had shaped who we were as a couple. Could I just let all of that go? My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and saw Jessica's name on the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, letting it go to voicemail. But something in me couldn't do it. I couldn't just cut her off like that, no matter how much I wanted to. I answered the call, my voice rough with exhaustion. Yeah. There was a long pause on the other end, and then Jessica's voice, small and broken. Mark, are you coming home? I didn't know how to respond to that. Was I coming home? Could I even call it home anymore? I don't know, I admitted, the weight of those words heavy in the silence between us. Jessica let out a shaky breath, and I could hear the desperation in her voice as she spoke again. Please, Mark, I need you to come back. I need to talk to you. We can't leave things like this. I wanted to tell her that things were already left like this, that her choices had already shattered everything between us. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. Not yet. Instead, I closed my eyes, feeling the exhaustion seep into my bones. I just need some time, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Time? She echoed, her voice trembling. How much time? Are you leaving me? Is this it? I didn't have an answer for her. How could I? I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. I don't know, Jessica, I said quietly. I just need to think. There was another long silence, and I could hear her soft sobs on the other end of the line. I'm so sorry, Mark, she whispered. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to lose you. Her words twisted something deep inside me, a part of me that still cared about her, still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to salvage this. But another part of me, the part that had seen her in bed with another man, knew that things would never be the same. I'll call you later, I said, ending the conversation before it could drag on any longer. The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and numbness. I stayed at a hotel, unable to face going back to the house where everything had fallen apart. Jessica called and texted me several times, but I didn't respond. I needed space, needed time to figure out what the hell I was going to do with the mess that had become my life. One morning, I found myself sitting at the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall, my thoughts racing in circles. Part of me wanted to just pack up my things, leave town, and start over somewhere new. But I knew that wasn't realistic. I couldn't run away from this. No matter where I went, the pain would follow me. Eventually, I called David. I hadn't told him what had happened yet, but I knew I couldn't keep it to myself forever. He answered on the second ring, his voice light and cheerful. Mark, man, long time no talk. How've you been? I hesitated, unsure of how to even begin to explain the situation. Not great, I admitted, my voice sounding flat even to my own ears. David's tone immediately shifted, concern seeping into his voice. What's going on? You sound like you've been hit by a truck. I think I have, I said with a bitter laugh. And then, before I could stop myself, the whole story came spilling out. The affair, the betrayal, everything. David listened in stunned silence as I recounted the events of the last few days, only interrupting occasionally with the occasional, "What the hell?" or "I can't believe this." By the time I finished, I felt drained, like reliving it all over again had taken the last bit of energy I had. Jesus, man, David finally said when I had finished. I don't even know what to say. That's messed up. I had no idea you guys were going through something like that. Neither did I said, leaning back against the headboard. I thought we were fine. I thought we were just, I don't know, going through a rough patch. But I never thought she'd do something like this. David let out a heavy sigh. I wish I could say something that would make it better, but there's no fixing this, man. Not unless you want to forgive her. And even then, it's going to be rough. Yeah, I muttered, rubbing a hand over my face. I don't know if I can. I mean, I still love her, but I don't know if I can ever trust her again. How do you come back from something like this? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before David finally spoke again. Honestly, I don't know. It's up to you, man. You've got to decide what you can live with. If you think there's a chance to rebuild, then go for it. But if you think it's going to tear you apart, you might need to walk away. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, I need to figure it out. After hanging up with David, I lay on the bed for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of everything. His words echoed in my head. You've got to decide what you can live with. But that was the problem. I didn't know what I could live with. I didn't know if I could ever look at Jessica again without seeing her with Greg, without feeling the sting of betrayal every time she smiled or touched me. I thought about our life together, all the good times, all the bad. We had been through so much, moving in together, getting married, building a home, talking about having kids. Could I just throw all of that away? Could I really walk away from the woman I had loved for so long? But then I remembered the image of her in our bed with another man. The way she had laughed, the way she had looked so at ease with him. That memory was burned into my brain, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake it. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos of us together. Vacations, holidays, quiet moments at home. In every picture, she was smiling, and I was smiling back at her, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. It felt like a different life, like those people in the photos weren't us anymore. They were strangers, living a lie that I hadn't even known existed. Finally, I made a decision. I couldn't keep running from this. I needed to face it head-on, no matter how painful it was going to be. I needed to talk to Jessica, to figure out where we stood and whether there was anything left to save. I drove back to the house that afternoon, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as I pulled into the driveway. It felt strange, being back here after everything that had happened. The house looked the same, but it felt different now, like the foundation had been cracked and everything was on the verge of collapsing. I sat in the car for a few minutes, staring at the front door, trying to summon the courage to go inside. Part of me wanted to turn around, to leave and never come back. But I knew that wasn't an option. I had to face this. I had to face her. Finally, I got out of the car and made my way to the front door. As soon as I stepped inside, the familiar smell of the house hit me, a mix of Jessica's perfume and the faint scent of the candles she always kept burning in the living room. It was a smell that had once made me feel at home, but now it just reminded me of everything that had been lost. Jessica was sitting on the couch, her legs curled up beneath her, staring blankly at the television. She looked up when she heard me come in, her eyes red and swollen from crying. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stared at each other, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. "Mark," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came back." "I came back," I repeated, my voice flat. "But I don't know if I'm staying." Her face crumpled at my words, and she let out a soft sob. "Please," she whispered, "please don't leave me." I didn't know what to say to that. How was I supposed to respond? Part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, that we could find a way to fix this. But the other part of me, the part that was still reeling from the betrayal, couldn't bring itself to offer her that kind of reassurance. "I don't know what you expect from me," I said, my voice tight. "You slept with another man, Jessica. You lied to me for months. How am I supposed to just forget that?" "I don't expect you to forget," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm begging you, Mark, don't give up on us. We've been through so much together. Please, don't let this be the end." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with desperation. I could see how much she was hurting, how much she regretted what she had done. But regret wasn't enough to erase the pain. It wasn't enough to make me forget the image of her with Greg, the sound of her laughter, the sight of them together in our bed. "I don't know if I can do this," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled but heartbreaking all the same. "I don't know what to say," she cried. "I don't know how to make this right. But I love you, Mark. I love you so much. Please, don't walk away from us." Her words cut deep, twisting the knife that was already lodged in my heart. I still loved her too, despite everything. But was that love enough to overcome the betrayal? Could I ever look at her the same way again? The silence stretched on, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Jessica sat there, her body trembling with sobs, while I stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. I wanted to say something, anything that could ease the tension between us, but the words wouldn't come. "I don't know if love is enough," I finally said, my voice low but steady. I don't know if we can come back from this. Jessica lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes filled with desperation. We can try, she whispered. Please, Mark, we can try. I'll do anything, counseling, whatever it takes. I don't want to lose you. Her plea hung in the air, and for the first time since I had discovered her betrayal, I felt a flicker of something other than anger. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was there. A small, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to salvage what we had. But then the memory of Greg's smug face, his arrogance, flashed through my mind, and that flicker was extinguished. I couldn't get the image of them together out of my head. Every time I looked at her, I saw him. I saw the lies, the deceit, the betrayal. I don't know if I can ever look at you and not see him, I admitted, my voice cracking. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Jessica let out a soft sob, her hands shaking as she wiped at her tears. I understand, she whispered. I know I've broken your trust, but if you give me a chance, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it back. Please, Mark, don't leave me. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. This was the woman I had loved for years, the woman I had built a life with, and now she was begging me not to leave her. It felt surreal, like I was watching this scene unfold from outside my body, like none of it was real. But it was real. It was all too real. I let out a shaky breath, running a hand through my hair as I tried to think. Could I really just walk away from everything we had shared? Could I really let this be the end? Part of me wanted to say yes, to leave and never look back. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, wasn't ready to give up just yet. I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I don't know if I can walk away either. Jessica stood up slowly, taking a tentative step towards me. Then don't, she whispered, her eyes pleading. Please, Mark, don't walk away. We can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes. Her words were filled with desperation, and for the first time, I saw how scared she really was. She was terrified of losing me, of losing everything we had built together. And despite everything she had done, despite the betrayal, I couldn't deny that a part of me was scared too. Scared of being alone. Scared of what life would be like without her. But was that fear enough to make me stay? I took a step back, needing to put some distance between us, needing space to think. I don't know, I said again, my voice heavy with exhaustion. I don't know if I can do this. Jessica let out a soft sob, her hands trembling as she reached out towards me. Please, she whispered, don't leave me. I love you, Mark. I love you so much. The words sounded hollow, even though I knew she meant them. They didn't change what she had done, didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But still, hearing her say them twisted something inside me. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. My mind was a storm of conflicting emotions, anger, sadness, love, fear. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to move forward from this. All I knew was that everything had changed, and there was no going back to the way things were before. I need time, I said quietly, my back still turned to her. I can't make any decisions right now. Jessica let out a shaky breath, her sobs subsiding slightly. Okay, she whispered. Take the time you need. But please, Mark, don't give up on us. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked towards the door, feeling the weight of her gaze on my back as I left the house. The door closed softly behind me, but the sound echoed in my ears like a gunshot. I stood on the porch, staring out into the fading light, feeling more lost than I had ever felt in my entire life. What now? Where did I go from here?